You've probably seen ferns before. They're pretty common houseplants and they look cool, right? But have you ever stopped and wondered what makes them so unique? Like, why are they always green, or why do they never produce flowers? Or why is it that all ferns share a striking resemblance to each other? These are questions that have puzzled scientists for centuries. And today we will finally get to ask one of the world's leading experts about these very issues. Hi there, welcome to my channel. I am a big fan of ferns, and I have even written a whole book about them. But to be honest, I still find many aspects of their biology mysterious and hard to understand. That's why I was so happy when Professor Emeritus at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew, agreed to answer some of our long-standing questions about ferns. This is a great opportunity for me to learn more about these fascinating plants and perhaps pick up a few interesting facts along the way. So let's dive in and see what secrets ferns are hiding. We'll start with something simple. Why are ferns always green? The answer, as often with science, is photosynthesis. You see, the green color comes from chlorophyll, which is a pigment that captures light energy for photosynthesis. Plants use this process to convert carbon dioxide, water, and light into sugars for food and oxygen as a byproduct. While most plants can also produce other pigments like anthocyanins, which give us reds and purples, ferns seem to lack these, resulting in their trademark green hues. But chlorophyll isn't just good at capturing light, it's also sensitive to it. And that's why ferns tend to grow in shady areas where the intensity of light is too high. This helps protect their delicate tissues from getting damaged by too much sunlight. It also explains why ferns are often found near the forest floor, on the sides of trees or in other places where shade is abundant. But wait a minute, you might have noticed that not all ferns are green. Some are actually brown or black. What's going on there? Well, it turns out that some ferns have lost the ability to photosynthesize, thanks to a little help from us humans. Yes, that's right. Someone decided that green plants were boring and created a new kind of fern that could blend in better with our decor. Okay, maybe not exactly. The truth is that these achlorophyllous ferns are rare exceptions that prove the rule. Most of them live in tropical rainforests where they can still get enough food from their environment, without needing to make their own. For example, one type of fern absorbs nutrients directly through its roots from decaying leaves on the forest floor. Others get their food from fungi that have special relationships with their root systems. And yes, there are even some ferns that rely on ants for sustenance. Yes, ants, you heard me right. There are several species of ferns, such as the ant plant, that have adapted to live inside the nests of ants. The ants take care of the plant by providing it with food and protection, while the plant benefits the ants by releasing chemicals that stimulate the growth of fungi on which the ants also feed. Now, this is an example of a mutually beneficial relationship known as symbiosis. However, these ferns are still green because they do perform photosynthesis. In fact, they have small green scales on their stems that contain chlorophyll. So these brown and black ferns are not true exceptions after all. They are simply cases where the green parts are very inconspicuous or absent due to evolutionary adaptations. So don't be fooled by their appearance. Most ferns are green. Now let's move on to another intriguing feature of ferns, their spores. You might have noticed that ferns don't produce seeds or flowers like most plants, but instead they have these tiny brown spots on their undersides called sori, which contain spores. Spores are basically cells that can travel through the air and grow into new ferns under the right conditions. This is how ferns reproduce, but it's not exactly the same process as sexual reproduction in seed plants. In fact, it's more similar to how fungi and single-celled organisms like bacteria reproduce. This has led some people to wonder if ferns are somehow related to fungi or bacteria. But don't worry, ferns are definitely plants. Their bodies are made of tissues that conduct water and nutrients like xylem and phloem, and they have structures called stomata that control gas exchange and water loss. They also have cell walls containing cellulose, which is a tough polysaccharide that gives plants their rigidity. So ferns are definitely plants, but they are more primitive than flowering plants. They belong to a group of plants called Vascular Cryptogams, which means they have vascular tissues, but their reproductive organs are hidden or cryptic. Cryptogams include other groups like mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. These groups are considered cryptogams because their reproductive organs are not exposed like they are in seed plants. Seed plants, gymnosperms, and angiosperms, on the other hand, are part of a group called phanerogams, which means their reproductive organs are visible or phanerosome. Now this brings us to the next burning question. Why don't ferns produce flowers? As it turns out, producing flowers requires a lot of energy and resources. And throughout most of Earth's history, there simply wasn't enough energy available for plants to evolve flowers. You see, flowers are basically modified leaves that attract pollinators like insects and birds with their colors, shapes, and scents. This adaptation only became possible when insects and other animals evolved and diversified. But until then, plants didn't need flowers to reproduce. They could just release spores and let them float away in the wind. Of course, this method is not as efficient as pollination, which is when a pollinator transfers pollen from one plant to another, increasing the chances of fertilization, but it works. Ferns still use spores to reproduce and spread. Also, producing flowers requires genes that code for traits like color vision, which are only found in certain animals and not in plants. So ferns don't have the genetic tools needed to make flowers, but that doesn't mean they are not evolving. Ferns are still changing over time. They just don't do it in the same way as flowering plants. For example, ferns can still change their morphology, adapting to different environments. This is why we see such a wide variety of fern species with different sizes, shapes, and textures. Some ferns have smooth edges on their fronds, while others have serrated edges. Some have short and stout stipes, while others have tall and slender ones. Even the arrangement of the fronds on the rhizome varies among species, resulting in different overall appearances, but it's not just about looks. Ferns can also change their chemistry, producing compounds that help them defend against herbivores or cope with stress. They can also change their behavior, such as how they respond to touch or gravity. For example, some ferns can curl up their fronds at night to conserve water or uncurl them during the day to capture more sunlight. So ferns are not stuck in the past. They are evolving, but they don't need flowers to do it. But wait, there's more. Another reason why ferns might seem stuck in the past is because they haven't changed much over time. Ferns have been around for a long time, longer than dinosaurs, in fact. They first appeared on land about 360 million years ago and have been basically the same ever since. This is not because they haven't changed. It's because they've become very successful at what they do. They have mastered the art of being ferns and don't need to reinvent themselves to survive. They have simple needs, reproduce easily, and don't bother with flashy stuff like flowers. And yes, they can thrive in various habitats from tropical rainforests to deserts and everything in between. So if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This also means that ferns have managed to avoid most major plant diseases and pests, which is another reason why they are so popular as houseplants. They are low maintenance, hardy, and rarely get sick. So if you want a plant that doesn't require much attention, a fern might be your best bet. In conclusion, ferns are amazing plants with lots of cool features and adaptations that make them unique. They are green because of photosynthesis, reproduce with spores, don't have flowers, and have been around for a very long time. Ferns are not only fascinating to learn about, but also wonderful to have around. They are beautiful, easy to care for, and don't need any special treatment. Ferns are just perfect the way they are. Thank you for watching this episode. I hope you learned something new and exciting about ferns. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get notified when we release our next episode. We have lots of interesting topics and experts lined up for you, so stay tuned. Until then, keep exploring the world around you and asking questions. Who knows? You might discover something amazing.